So without stealing any more of his thunder, guys, I want to turn you over to CSP, Cutco Hall of Famer, and our division office manager, and my very good friend, Calvin Lopez.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I love people talking about me positively. It's awesome. I got the task of talking to y'all about Rapport. I'm super excited about it because I feel like rapport building is probably one of the most underrated things that new reps actually realize whenever they're doing their presentations. I bet if I asked all of you if you built rapport with your parents before you started your presentation, 90% of you would probably say no. And I know the thought process behind it is like, oh, it's mom and dad. I know everything there is to know. Like, I promise you don't. They've lived for a very long life. There's many stories they have that they probably will never tell you. But the idea behind rapport building is Brian brought it up, and it's such a huge thing, though. It's like me, know me, trust me, pay me. So like what that is like, that's basically the way the sales transaction is going to work. Like, you need a customer to like you before they want to get to know you. They need to know you before they want to trust you. And they have to trust you if they're going to pay you. Like, it's such a simple breakdown that we got from a high level person, but it makes so much sense. So if you don't take the time in the beginning of your presentation to get to know your customer, it's almost like you're taking them for granted. Rapport building literally changes the tone for everything that's going to happen from like that beginning part of it. It literally can change everything. Like, all of a sudden, the more invested you get in your customer, the more time you take to get to know them, the more serious they're going to take you whenever you start to share your goals and you start to explain everything that you're trying to do while you're here with us. And then when you actually get into the presentation to show them Cutco, because of that level of trust or that level of getting to know them that you made, that's why they kind of get so invested in everything you start to say after the fact. So whenever you skip over that first section or you just kind of skim it and you're like, hey, how's your day? Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Sounds really fun. All right, let me tell you about me. Like, it definitely kind of shifts the way the conversation's going to go. So you don't want it to be so one-sided. And then the other thing about rapport building, when you're getting to know a customer, your big focus always wants to be about them. Like, you don't want it to always be about you. You have a whole section of your presentation that's for. So everything that in the beginning needs to be about them. I know a lot of people probably don't just have that natural charisma where they can walk up to strangers and just have these kind of conversations, and that's totally fine. A lot of our guys already know some of the things that I'm going to tell you because we told it to them in training, but repetition is key. So we're going to keep telling it to you. So hopefully you'll start to do it every single time you do a presentation. Now, again, the worst thing you can do when you're trying to get to know somebody is you can ask those types of questions that are close-ending questions, like basically questions that are like give you yes or no answers. Those are the things that you always want to avoid. Like, you never want to ask yes or no questions, because how many of y'all have been in that conversation where you ask that yes or no question and then they answer and then you get that awkward pause? Like, that's the worst thing ever for a conversation. That's the one thing you want to avoid as much as possible. So I always try to ask something that's going to lead into a story. It's going to lead into an explanation. It's going to give them something to kind of really give me feedback, because I can use whatever answers they're giving me. I can use that to kind of connect with them at a higher level, and we can have a good, meaningful conversation. Now, I'm going to give y'all 3 questions that I want you to write down. I will say, if you want a really great pro tip to make your demonstrations easier, you should print out your training manual. It's very simple to do. You should definitely do that. You can take notes in your manual. All these tips and things that we're giving you, you can actually write them in there. It's just print out your manual. It costs you 20 cents if you go to Office Depot or something, but such a great thing to do for the future for sure. Now, the questions that I'm going to give you right now that you should ask all your customers, especially if you don't know how to kind of just create those natural conversations. First one is, how did you and your husband meet? How did you and your husband meet? Obviously, this is a great question because we should be hiring people, because that's how we're going to get the best results, obviously, when we're selling Cutco. So how did you and your husband meet? The second question is, how did he propose? Again, the second question is, how did he propose? And the third question is, how long have you lived in the area? So I'm going to type them in the chat as well. But the reason I love these questions is because they're such good conversation starters that give me really good stories. They put the customer into a positive state of mind, and you're going to get so many different reactions from these types of questions. I've had people tell me this crazy story that, like, oh my gosh, I met him at this coffee shop, and like when I saw him walk in, our eyes locked, and it was just, I knew there was something there. And it kind of leads into these long, great stories, and they're so amazing. The customer's so excited to tell it. And again, it just puts them in a really positive place. And I just know, like, it's going to be amazing. And I've had the weird ones where the lady was like, oh my gosh, we had friends in college, and he showed up to something I was at, and I was like, hey, what's up? And I was like, wow, I can feel the love. And you'll literally get everything in between. But again, these are just, it's a positive question. It's a personal question, but it's not so personal that it's weird. And it's something that people do like to talk about. The same reason I asked how did he propose, because so many people have so many great proposal stories. Like, they get so excited when they tell it. They know all the little details. They're so enthusiastic. And again, I'm using that energy that I'm building from the report. I'm going to transfer that super positive, exciting energy. I'm going to use that to transfer it into the Cutco demo, and they're going to be super excited. It's just a great thing. And the reason I ask them how long they've lived in the area, I do that because honestly, I'm going to ask them for recommendations later, and that's going to give me some really crazy good feedback. Because when I ask, oh my gosh, how long have you lived in the area? They're going to be like, oh man, I've lived here for, 10 or 15 years. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So your kids must be super involved here in the neighborhood, huh? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh, you must know all of your neighbors, everybody around you. Like, literally, I'm arming them with all these answers that they're going to give me. So when I ask them for recommendations later, like, I'm going to know, oh yeah, they lived there for 20 years. They know everybody in the neighborhood. Their kids are super active in sports. Like, I know all these people. So when they're like, oh, I know these few people, I'm like, awesome. What about the people your kids play soccer with? What about the neighbors that you said you've been around for 20 years? Like, it's just a nice little extra bonus for you for later on in the presentation. But the idea behind it is, again, I want to kind of break down those walls, because again, they're thinking, oh, this is a sales call or this is a sales pitch. But again, when I start to get to know them, they're like, man, this guy, he really took time to get to know who I was and what I'm about. Now I'm going to go into sharing my goals, which is another part of the rapport building. Is just like, you need to share your goals at a high level to make sure they understand why you're working here, what you're doing. I'm sure a ton of y'all have a great personal story that you're going to tell them about your schools, your hobbies, your family, your dream job, whatever the manual tells you to do. But whenever I'm talking to the customer and I'm trying to share those goals, like, I want them to be important. I want them to be meaningful. The first thing that I will never, ever talk about is, I will never talk about I'm working with Cutco because I want to make a lot of money. Like, hands down, terrible thing. It doesn't translate right to them. It's okay if that's why you're here. If that's your reasoning, that's totally fine. That's why I started selling Cutco in the first place. But you got to dig a little deeper and figure out, what is it that you want to make that money for? Like, when you think about it, like, oh, I want to make money because I'm trying to pay off some tuition for school. Talk about you're working here because you want to pay off tuition for school. If you're trying to get your own place so you can move out of your parents' house, awesome. Talk about how you're trying to become financially independent so that way you can start your life outside of your parents' home. All of a sudden, that's a way better reasoning for these customers that they can relate to, or they're going to think about, and they're going to be like, man, Calvin came by, he showed me Cutco, he told me how he was working hard to be financially independent. He really wanted to pay his way through college. He wanted to graduate debt-free, which is such a huge thing. It's so hard to do these days. And I wish my kid had that same kind of motivation. Like, literally, you want to tell these parents something that they're going to think back and be like, man, I wish my kid was doing that too. And that's not saying because we're trying to recruit their kid. That's just saying, like, that's the kind of impact you want to have with these people. And when you have these good, strong conversations with these parents and with these customers, that's the stuff that they're going to reflect on when they're like, man, you know what? I'm kind of on the fence about buying this set, but man, I know I can afford it. I know I could use it. I know I'm going to use it. He's working super hard. I want to help this guy hit his goals. You know what? Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do that. Let's get that. You know what? I don't even want free stuff because you're working so hard. Like, those are kind of a lot of the types of conversations I have when I'm asking customers if they want to buy something, because we built that connection and they're invested in what I'm doing because I was invested in who they were. So it's kind of like a domino effect that's a very positive one for you whenever you sit down and you take the time to get to know a customer and you share your goals in the right kind of way. Everything else after the fact is so much easier. It's so much better. It's the responses you get from your customers are so much stronger. And you'd be surprised how many customers, when they get invested in you and your goals, the stuff they'll do for you long term. Like, I don't know how many customers I've had that I was just like, hey, here's my goal for the year. And I do this all the time at the beginning of the year when I start running into customers. I let them know what my goals are. I let them know why I'm working towards them and everything else. And those are the people I call on later when I'm in a big push contest, like right now for SC1 or something. Those are the people I reach back out to. And I'm like, hey, I'm only X amount of dollars away from my goal. I know you said I should reach back out to you if I needed a little bit of extra help to get there. And those are the people that buy an extra 2 or 3 times. So that way, because again, I took that time to kind of let them know what I was doing and why. So I can't stress it enough. Like, when you take the time to get to know your customers, take the time to let them get to know you, explain your goals in the right kind of way, and everything else will kind of fall into place. Like, you'd be surprised all of a sudden the change that you'll see whenever you start doing that in the beginning, how many more how many more sales you start to get, or how many more bigger sales you start to get because of that one little shift you made whenever you're doing your presentation. So just build more rapport. Don't take it for granted.
Just do it. Just do it and do more of it. That's awesome. Well, guys, Calvin had so many good tips in there, and I think the biggest thing is just the confidence in that he has with it, and that's come from just putting himself out there. And when you think about situations that make people nervous, y'all, and sometimes like the nerves are the reason we don't build rapport or ask the orders confidently or follow our phone approach or get as many recommendations. Guys, it tends to be high dollar points of your life when some of those nerves kick in. Okay, and think about job interviews. Think about meeting like your spouse's family for the first time. Think about areas like that. That's like high pressure type situations. And so learning how to develop those coping mechanisms now, learning how to think your way through things and not just respond to how you feel or nerves or that sort of thing is such a key area. And in my experience, the more rapport you build, the more comfortable you start to make people feel, the more relaxed everything becomes. So there's certain things that I talk about with our team here. There's certain things that are knife skills, and there's certain things that are life skills. Okay, everything Calvin just went over, that was life skills. And so I'm excited for it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Calvin.